Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira. We always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sincerity in what we do and what we say, that He make this gathering a source of goodness and benefit for us, that it not be a fitna for us, that He guide us to His straight path and bless us to perform beneficial actions and increase us in righteous knowledge. Today's topic is how to benefit from the night prayer or the Taraweeh prayer. And I'm going to take a different angle on this today, which I think is an important angle to take on it. And I think what most people are intending to benefit from this class, from this lesson, I think that'll be covered tomorrow in the next class. But the first thing that's important for us to understand that we benefit from the Taraweeh prayer is the importance of as-salah. The importance of as-salah in Islam. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated that we pray the Taraweeh prayer in Ramadan is an indication of how important salah is in a Muslim's life. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases us in prayer, which is important because we consider Ramadan to be the month of what? It's not what it's worth, but when we think of Ramadan, what worship do we think of Ramadan?
Gratitude.
What worship? Fasting. We think of fasting, but we don't realize oftentimes how important prayer is. And so from the strange actions of Muslims is you'll find an individual will be diligent in fasting, but won't pray. Won't pray the 5 daily prayers. The fast, they abstain from food and drink, and they see that as important. But they neglect their prayers at the same time. Even though we were informed by the Prophet ﷺ that the first thing you'll be questioned about is what? Your salah. The very first thing you'll be asked about. And if it's in order, then everything else, inshallah, will be in order. And if it's not in order, then nothing else is going to be in order. So the fact that Allah gives attention to salah is an indication of the importance of salah in Islam. And we can see this in a number of ways. Number one, that fasting and prayer, fasting and the Taraweeh prayer, the night prayer, have the same exact reward. They have the same exact reward. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith of Abi Hurairah, "Man sama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbi." Whoever fasts Ramadan as a believer and seeking Allah's reward will have what? All of his previous sins forgiven. And then the Prophet ﷺ also said, وَمَنْ قَامَ رَمَضَانَ إِيمَانًا وَاحْتِسَابًا غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. Whoever stands to pray in Ramadan as a believer seeking Allah's reward will have his previous sins forgiven. وَمَنْ قَامَ لَيْلَةَ الْقَدْرِ إِيمَانًا وَاحْتِسَابًا غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. Whoever stands on Laylatul Qadr, and he stands doing what? Praying. As a believer and seeking Allah's reward, will have his previous sins forgiven. So the idea of getting your sins forgiven goes for fasting, and it also goes for prayer. Number two, they are complementary acts of worship. Prayer and fasting are complementary. They encompass all of what Allah wants you to do. And they are two sister acts of worship, and they are two mother acts of worship. I mean by mother acts of worship that they are representative, not only do you do them, but they're representative of other types of worship that Allah wants from us. And so, what Allah wants from us, what He wants us to do, is to do what we're told to do and to stay away from what He tells us not to do. He wants us to do what He tells us to do. He wants us to do what He tells us to do and stay away from what He tells us to stay away from. Now, if you look at fasting, is that doing what Allah wants you to do or staying away from what Allah tells you to stay away from? Staying away from what Allah tells you to stay away from. And so in Ramadan, by staying away from the forbidden, from the permissible, by staying away from the permissible, food and drink and being intimate with your spouse, you're that much stronger in staying away from what's impermissible. And what excuse do you have on the day of judgment? Oh Allah, I couldn't stay away from the haram. Well, you stayed away from what was permissible for 13 hours. So you stayed away from what Allah says you can't have temporarily. And prayer, is that staying away from what He forbids or doing what He commands? Doing what He commands. And that's the religion. Anything that Allah asks you to do is going to be of one of those two categories. Either He's telling you to do something or to stay away from something. And so prayer and fasting cover those two areas. Prayer is doing what He tells you to do, and fasting is staying away from what He tells you to stay away from. Yeah, so they're complementary acts of worship. Number 3, they are both doors to Jannah. They are both doors to Jannah. In the hadith of Abi Hurairah, radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that whoever is consistent, any the meaning of it, whoever is consistent in extra prayers, any outside of the mandatory, he will be called from the door of Salah. And one of the doors of Jannah is called the door of Salah. And whoever is consistent in extra fasting will be called from the door of Ar-Rayyan.
Mondays and Thursdays.
Well, a person doesn't have to fast Monday and Thursday to get that reward. If a person fasted once a week, or as the Prophet ﷺ told Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As and Abi Hurairah, fast 3 days out of the month. If you fast 3 days out of the month, just 3 days, any 3 days you want, you can fast Monday, and stop. Or you can fast the 13th, 14th, and 15th and stop. Or at the very beginning of the month, you can do the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and then enjoy the rest of your month. Why 3 days? Because every good deed gets multiplied by 10. And so 3 times 10 is 30. And so if you do 3 days, it's as if you've done 30 days. And if you've done 30 days of fasting, that's the whole what? Month. And if you do that every month, it's as if you fasted the entire year. 3 days. You fast 3 days a month, it's as if you fasted the entire year. So anyone who fasts, does the extra fast, and is consistent, then he will be called from the door of Ar-Rayyan. Ar-Rayyan is the door that's specific to those who fast. And those who fast will go in that door, and once the last fasting person enters, it'll be closed and no one else will enter through that door. The point here is that there's a door in Jannah for those who fast, and there's a door in Jannah for those who pray. Extra prayers. Number 4, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tied prayer to fasting. How? With food. He's tied prayer to fasting with food. And so, when do you take suhoor? When do you eat the meal before you start your fast? When do you eat it? When? After the sun rises? Before the sun rises. About what time?
About 2:30, 2 o'clock.
You have to eat it that early? No, the Prophet and his companions used to eat it late.
Oh, okay.
Just before what?
Fajr.
Just before Fajr. And so the person who's up for suhoor and follows the sunnah of suhoor by delaying it is already up for Fajr. You're already up for Fajr. And you lay back down, that's very sinful. That's very bad. And so for 30 days, you're in the habit of getting up to have your suhoor. And at the same time, you're in the habit of getting up for Fajr. You don't have much of an excuse. You got up for your stomach. You got up for your stomach. You can get up for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when do you break your fast? When the sun sets, at Maghrib time. At Maghrib time. And it's customary for people to break their fast where? At the masjid. And so you already came to the masjid to eat. And so you might as well stay to pray. And so you find that prayer and fasting are complementary acts of worship. They come together. And so, again, what Tarawih, the night prayer in Ramadan, what it teaches us is the importance of a salah in Islam. The importance of salah in Islam. And what indicates that for us is, as is mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the Prophet himself, he stood to pray in his home. And people found out that he was praying. And so what did they do? They followed behind him in prayer. And so they did that the first night. And then the second night, they did it again, and there was a larger crowd. And the third night, they came again, and there was a larger crowd. And then the fourth night, Prophet didn't do it. He didn't come out. He didn't let people know what he was doing. And they started throwing rocks at the door to let him know they was outside. He wouldn't come in. Why? Because he was afraid that it would become mandatory. He was afraid that it would become mandatory. Why would Allah make it mandatory for us to pray these prayers? Because Allah loves prayer so much. Seeing the believers come together for prayer, prayer is beloved to Allah. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ was brought up to Jannah, brought up to the seventh heaven for prayer to be legislated. So much so that Allah will, first, how many prayers do we have to pray? 50. 50. That's how much Allah loves prayer, and that's how much we need prayer. And because of our weakness, Allah lessened it and lessened it and lessened it until he made it 5 with the reward of 50. So the first thing we benefit from Tarawih prayer, from the night prayer in Ramadan, is that Allah loves salah. Allah loves salah. And a person who fasts, takes care of his fast, but is negligent in his salah, has a problem. Has a problem in understanding Islam. Prayer is important. Prayer is the only act of worship where there's a major difference of opinion amongst the scholars about whether or not it takes you out of Islam if you leave it. That's the importance. And so a person sees that Allah legislates prayer, that we, not just prayer, there's no other time of the year that Muslims come together for a whole month and pray together at night. Yet if you were to come together nightly to the masjid and pray at night, that would be a what? That would be a what? Be a bid'ah. Be an innovation. You don't come together like that. That wasn't done during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But this prayer, in Ramadan, we come together. We come together in congregation and we pray this prayer. We do it together. And that being together, it lightens the burden of it. It makes it easier. Even if you felt like leaving, you don't want to leave because everybody else is there. The old man is there. The old sister is there. The children are there. How am I going to leave in this thing? It's only 30 days. So that's the first benefit, the importance of as-salah. Number two, in order to benefit from the night prayer, it's important to understand that Ramadan is not the objective in and of itself. People act like Ramadan is a goal for itself. That I'm working to complete Ramadan. And if I complete Ramadan, then I've done my contribution to Islam. La. Ramadan is the preseason. Ramadan is training for the rest of the year. And for anybody who trains in any sport, you always train harder than you're actually going to have to play. You're always going to train harder than you have to play. A person who boxes is going to run miles. Why? So that when he gets in the ring for regular fights, he has stamina and conditioning. He's able to endure. Athletes practice the same thing over and over again for a 10-second race. They do more than they have to do so that when they get in the race, they're ready. And so in Ramadan, we worship like we don't worship at any other time of the year. That you're not even allowed to worship like that. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, who we're going to hear about a little bit later. The Prophet ﷺ heard about him that he used to fast every day and he used to pray all night. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, a young Sahabi, wasn't an old, he was a young Sahabi. He used to fast every day and he used to pray all night. The Prophet heard this about him. So he asked him, do you do that? He said, yes, it's true. I swear by Allah, it's true. Yes. He said, you can't do that. He said, but fast and break your fast, and pray and sleep. He said, and if you're going to fast, why don't you fast 3 days out of the month? Because 3 days out of the month is as if you fasted all year. He said, I can do better than that. He said, well, why don't you fast 1 day and break your fast for 2 days? He said, I can do better than that. He said, well, why don't you fast every other day? Because that's the fast of Dawood, alayhi salam. And that's the best fast. He said, I can do better than that. He said, there isn't anything better than that. And it's not permissible for a person to fast every day. The best you're allowed to do, the most you're allowed to do is every other day. And then when he described the prayer of Dawood alayhi salam, the Prophet Dawood, he said his prayer was the best prayer. How did he used to pray? All night long? No. He used to pray, he used to sleep for half of the night. And then he would pray for a third of the night, and then he would sleep for another sixth. He would pray, he would sleep half the night, pray for a third, and then sleep another sixth. That was his prayer. The Prophet ﷺ described that as what? How did he describe that? As the best. As the best. And if it's the best, that means there's nothing better. So, fasting every day outside of Ramadan, is that okay to do? No. And praying all night long, is that good to do? No. It's not described as the best. But in Ramadan, there's an exception. You're allowed to fast every single day. You have to fast. It's not allowed to. You have to fast every single day in the month of Ramadan. You fast every single day. And in the last 10 nights, to spend the entire night in worship is a good thing. Is a good thing. The point is that this is a training ground. This is a training ground. That we work harder than we do any other time of the year. Why? Because we're training for the next 11 months. It's not about doing this great job in Ramadan and then just falling out. No, you're doing all of this, and by doing all of this, the normal stuff becomes easy. And if you can fast every day, if you can fast every single day, then staying away from what Allah has forbidden is easier. If you got up at night and prayed all night, if you got up after praying 5 prayers and fasted all day, and you stood for a whole nother hour, tired, ready to go to sleep, but you prayed seeking Allah's reward, then how much easier is it now to pray 5 prayers? It's easier. It's easier. And so the first thing about this prayer, or the next thing about this prayer, is recognizing that the night prayer is not the end of itself. And neither is Ramadan. It's not the end in itself. It is a training ground. A person is able to build up for the next 11 months. The next 11 months, you're supposed to be ready for it because you spent this 1 month training. And Allah removed all barriers that would get in the way of your training. Allah removed all of the barriers that would get in the way of your training. What are the barriers that get in the way of your training? The shaitan and yourself. The shaitan and yourself. And this is captured in the hadith of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, where he asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to teach him a dua to say every morning and every evening. He taught him to say, Allahumma fatir as-samawati wal ard. O Allah, originator of the heavens and earth, alim al-ghaybi wa shahada, knower of the seen and the unseen, rabba kulli shay, the Lord and caretaker of everything, wa malika, and its owner and controller and king. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. I seek refuge. I bear witness that none is worthy of worship. I bear witness that none is worthy of worship except for you. A'udhu bika min sharri nafsi. I seek refuge with you from the evil of myself. Wa sharri shaytani wa shirkihi or sharakihi. And I seek refuge with you from the evil of the shaitan and his partners or his snares, the traps that he lays out for me. In this dua, we seek refuge from 2 things. What are they? The shaitan and the evil of the shaitan and the evil of ourselves. How is Ramadan, how does that take away the evil of ourselves? Right, because we're fasting. And so in fasting, you stay away from your food, you stay away from your drink, and you also improve your own character. You're not supposed to yell. You're not supposed to insult. And if anybody insults you or tries to fight with you, what do you say? I'm fasting. I'm not going there with you. I'm not doing that with you because I'm a servant of Allah. I restrain myself for the sake of Allah. So you're protected from your own evil. And how are you protected from the evil of the shaitan? Because in Ramadan, what happens to the shaitan? He's tied up. And so you get a good training. No distractions. You get a whole month to train hard without any interference from anyone or anything. Allah makes it a good training session. So now when he's let loose, you already have your defenses. You're already in the mode you need to be in by Allah's permission to already be in that habit. You've already developed for 30 days, you developed the habit of being a complete slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the idea. It's a training session. And that's the idea. Don't see Ramadan as the goal. Don't feel like I finished Ramadan, I've done my job. No. Ramadan is the beginning. It's the preseason. The next 11 months, that's the game. That's the games and the playoff and the championships. That's what you're fighting for. But you're getting yourself in conditioning to be able to deal with it. And again, that's why the worship in Ramadan increases. You give more charity. You fast every day. You pray more. You read more Quran. You do more in Ramadan. Why? So that the regular that you do during the rest of the year is easy. No excuses. So that's number one. Number two is understanding the benefit of the night prayer. And everything that Allah does, He does with hikmah. He does with wisdom. And so Allah wouldn't legislate this prayer unless this prayer has a benefit for us. And so from the benefits of this prayer that we learn is we learn the importance of the prayer itself. Collected in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, we have two hadith from two Sahabi. Both of their names are Abdullah, but they're two different Abdullahs. The first Abdullah is Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Umar had a dream. And in the dream, summarizing, we don't want to focus too much on the dream, but in the dream, he saw himself near the hellfire. And in his dream, he said, A'udhu billahi minan nar. A'udhu billahi minan nar. A'udhu billahi minan nar. I seek refuge with Allah from the fire. He kept saying it. And the angel said, the angel who was there said to him, you don't have any need to be afraid. He said, you don't have any need to be afraid. And so, Ibn Umar reported this hadith, this dream. He told his dream to his sister Hafsa, his sister Hafsa, who's the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. And she told the hadith to the Prophet ﷺ. And the interpretation, the Prophet ﷺ's interpretation of this dream is that he said, "Ura anna ibn Umar anna Abdullah rajulun salihan." He said, I see anna Abdullah rajulun salihun. He said, I see Abdullah ibn Umar as a righteous person. In some narrations of the hadith, he said, Ni'ma rajul Abdullah law kana yusalli min al-layl or law qama min al-layl. Abdullah would be an excellent person if he got up to pray at night. Abdullah would be an excellent person if he got up to pray at night. And some of the scholars of this hadith, who explain this hadith, they mention, if he had been of those who prayed, he wouldn't have been even shown the fire in that way. And he was shown the fire and told that he was safe. But the idea that the fire was even shown to him in that way showed that there was some negligence there. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned how wonderful Abdullah would be if he prayed at night. And after hearing the Prophet say that, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he used to sleep only a little bit. What's also a possibility as well, or what also might go with that, is that when a person is given glad tidings that he will be from the people of Jannah, that he has been saved from hell, how should he feel? If a person is told that they are saved from hell, how should they feel? Happy. And how else? Thankful. To be saved from the fire, it deserves gratitude. The Prophet ﷺ was asked about why he prayed at night, even though all of his sins had been forgiven. He said, Prophet ﷺ, why do you stand to pray until your feet swell, even though all of your sins have been forgiven? What did he say? Shouldn't I be a thankful slave? So perhaps it's also an indication to Ibn Umar. And now that you've received this glad tidings in your dream, show gratitude. Show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has indicated to you that you've been saved from the fire. That you've been saved from the fire, or that you will be saved from the fire. The idea that this prayer is a prayer of gratitude. The idea that every act of worship that we do, is it because of our righteousness that we do worship, that we do acts of worship? No. No. And if you think that because you do good acts because you're righteous, then that means that there's a khalal, there's a deficiency in your iman. The righteousness that you see in yourself is from what? Is from Allah. Allah blessed you to do it. Allah blessed you to do it. That dua that we make in our prayer. That dua that we make in our prayer. What's the dua that we make in our prayer? Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. That guidance to the straight path is two types of guidance. The guidance of knowing what to do, and the guidance of doing what you know you're supposed to do. I got two words for you that rhyme, that inshallah, remembering these two words will help you to remember it. You have the guidance of information, that you know what's right, and the guidance of implementation, that Allah gives you the success to do what you're supposed to do. Which is why when the mu'adhin says, Hayya ala salah, come to prayer, Hayya ala al-falah, come to success, do you repeat after him and say the same thing? No. What do you say? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no change and no power except with Allah. Why do you say that? Why not just repeat after the mu'adhin? What's the significance of saying there is no power or no might except with Allah when the mu'adhin says come to prayer and come to success? Because your ability to come to prayer is tied to Allah giving you success to do that. I hear this call, but I will not respond to this call unless Allah helps me to respond to it. How many other people heard the same adhan go off in their phones, go off in the masjid, and they don't pray, or they come late, or they continue in a conversation? The fact that you came to the masjid, that you prayed, you stayed around to pray, that you wanted to pray, that is success from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so righteousness, worship, is success from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why when the believers enter Jannah, what will they say? As mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, chapter number 7 of the Quran, وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي هَدَانَا لِهَذَا. All praises to Allah who guided us to this. Guided us to Jannah, and guided us to the actions of the people of Jannah. وَمَا كُنَّا لِنَهْتَدِيَ لَوْلَا أَنْ هَدَانَ اللَّهِ. And we could not have guided ourselves if Allah had not guided us. And so our righteousness comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. And so the fact that a person gets up to pray at night, that is success from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is Allah wanting good for that individual. And that prayer at night is different from other prayers. And you're able to concentrate more. The day is over. There's no work to worry about. There's no people to worry about feeding. It's a chance you get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to yourself. It's a chance you're alone. No one nagging you or bothering you. Your obligations of the day are finished, and you have a chance to really focus on your prayer. And so Abdullah ibn Umar was encouraged, and a sign of his righteousness, a sign of him being from the best. What an excellent person Abdullah ibn Umar would be if he prayed at night. This is the Prophet ﷺ saying. And so if we want to see excellence in ourselves, then that night prayer is access to that. Allah describes those who pray at night as muhsineen. إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي جَنَّةٍ وَعُيُونٍ. The muttaqeen, Yani we strive in Ramadan to be يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Fasting has been prescribed for you. Why? So that you can have taqwa. Allah mentions in Surah Al-Dhariyat, chapter number 51, Innal muttaqeen, the people of taqwa, Innal muttaqina fi jannatin wa uyun, will be in gardens and with rivers. Akhidhina ma atahum rabbuhum, they will be taking what their Lord gave them. Innahum kanu qabla dhalik muhsinin, they were excellent people before that, and before they got to Jannah. How were they excellent? The very first description that he mentions, كَانُوا قَلِيلًا مِنَ اللَّيْلِ مَا يَهْجَعُونَ, they used to lay down very little at night. The very first description that he gives of the people of taqwa is that they slept little. And so again, we see again what we mentioned at the very beginning, was that connection between what? Prayer and fasting. Fasting is a means of taqwa, and prayer is also a means and a sign of taqwa. The muttaqeen prayed, they slept a little bit because they were praying so much. And fasting has been prescribed so that you can gain a taqwa. No. And so it's a sign of righteousness. It's a sign of righteousness. It's a sign of excellence. So that's one idea. The other thing that we benefit about prayer in Ramadan is the idea of developing consistency. Consistency. We mentioned that Abdullah ibn Amr, not Abdullah ibn Umar, but Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he used to pray every night, all night. He used to pray all night, and he used to fast every day. And the Prophet ﷺ explained to him that that's not the best. The best is to be off and on and to give yourself rest. The Prophet ﷺ told Abdullah ibn Amr, he said, don't be like so-and-so. He said, don't be like so-and-so. لا تكونوا مثل فلان. إنه كان يقوم الليل ثم ترك. He used to pray at night and then he left it. Why did he tell Abdullah ibn Amr that? He was showing him that, okay, right now, you're doing all of this worship. You're going extreme. You're taxing yourself. Are you going to be able to maintain this down the road? When you get older, are you going to be able to fast like this and pray like this? And you start in a way that you're going to be able to finish. Don't be like so-and-so who used to pray. He used to pray at night and then he stopped. And Abdullah ibn Amr al-As himself, when he narrates his hadith, he said himself, when he got older, I wish I had taken the concession that the Prophet ﷺ gave me. I wish I had lowered down and done little. I'd done less than what I was doing. At the same time, he committed himself to consistency. And even when he got sick and he couldn't pray every other day, he would make the day up. He maintained consistency. It was important to him. So the idea, another way we benefit from praying at night, the night prayer, is developing a consistency. For 30 days, you've gotten up at night to pray. Keep doing it. And what's important here, and it's a problem, it's a mistake that people make. There's two places that you don't compare yourself to anyone else. Don't compare yourself to anyone else in two areas. Don't compare yourself in sin, and don't compare yourself in worship. Never compare yourself. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous to compare yourself in sin and to compare yourself in good deeds. Why? What's the problem in comparing yourself to someone else in sin?
Like it could be saying like you're better than that person if he commits a major sin and you commit a minor sin.
Right. You will begin to belittle your own sins. You'll begin to think that your sins aren't that bad. I'm not committing zina. I'm not stealing. I didn't kill anyone. They do that stuff. I didn't do any of that. The problem with that is Allah's not going to ask you about their sins. He's going to ask you about your sins. That's the first problem. The second problem is it's a sin. For you to consider it as little is as if you're belittling Allah. Because that's who you sinned against. Allah told you not to do it. And you did it anyway. How is that small? You get the point. It's not the sin itself. It's who you've committed the sin against. That's the problem. And so we don't compare ourselves in sin. Like you said, it causes you to be arrogant. You begin to look down on people, and arrogance is itself a what? A sin. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have mentioned, no one will enter Jannah if he has an ounce of kibr, an ounce of arrogance, pride in his heart. And so that sin of arrogance that comes from comparison, of belittling your own sins, because now that you see your sins as small, you're less likely to do what?
Stop.
You're less likely to stop, and you're less likely to seek forgiveness. Seek forgiveness. You're going to stop doing what you need to do. No one gets to Jannah without Allah's forgiveness. No one. No one. Ibrahim alayhi salam. You know who Ibrahim is, yes? The prophet, the one who built the Kaaba. Yeah, the one who's Allah's close friend, right? The one who's going to slaughter his son for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who left his family, his firstborn, left him in Mecca with very little water and food. You know what I'm talking about. The one who built the Kaaba. You know what I'm talking about. In Surati Shu'ara, chapter number 26 of the Quran, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَالَّذِي أَطْمَعُ أَنْ يَغْفِرَ لِي خَطِيئَتِي يَوْمَ الدِّينِ, that he is the one who I hope will forgive my sins on the day of judgment. Ibrahim says, the Khalil of Allah says, I hope that Allah will forgive my sins on the day of judgment. That was his what? That was his hope. That was his hope. What is hope? What is hope?
Something you look forward to.
Something you look forward to. Something you want to happen, but you're not sure it will. Something you want to happen, but you're not sure that it will. Ibrahim says he hopes that Allah will forgive him on the day of judgment. And so we don't take seeking forgiveness lightly. But belittling your sins makes you take seeking forgiveness lightly. Also worship. You don't compare yourself in worship. Because if you compare yourself in worship, you're going to lose hope. You're going to think that what you do is little, too little. Look at me, I'm not doing anything. Look at him. He's doing all that worship. Look at her. She's always doing this and always doing that. I'm not doing anything. How am I going to make it to Jannah? Allah is not going to ask you about what the worship he did. She did. He's going to ask you about the worship you did. As Allah mentions, وَلَا نُكَلِّفُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. We don't burden any soul more than it can bear, it can stand. So what does that have to do with praying the night prayer? Customarily, customarily in Ramadan, night prayer is at 2 times. The night prayer happens at 2 main times. What are the 2 times?
Isha and,
Right after Isha. So usually the night prayer, Tarawih, happens right after Isha. And then in the last 10 nights, when does it happen?
third of the night.
The last third of the night. Jamil. Which one is better? The last third of the night, right? Why?
Because you're forsaking your sleep.
You're forsaking your sleep, but it's also the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
Comes to
descends
the
to the lowest heaven in a way befitting to His majesty. And He asks, who is calling on me so that I can answer him? Who is seeking forgiveness? See that forgiveness, the importance of forgiveness. Who is seeking forgiveness so that I can forgive him? Who is asking of me so that I can answer his request? And so in Ramadan, you get these 2 times. And we said that the last third of the night is the best. But not everybody is able to do that. Maybe because of a work schedule. Maybe because you're a heavy sleeper. People are different. Again, Ramadan is the training ground. You get a chance in Ramadan to see where your comfort level is. Where do you start getting tired in the night prayer? So you pray right after Isha. How are the first 2 rakats? Are they okay for you? How are the next 2? You've done 4. How was that for you? Was it tough? Was it easy? How about another 2? You did 6 now. How about another 2? You did 8. You can see where your comfort level is. Why? Why is that important? So after Ramadan, you can continue. See where you start getting tired. See where your own threshold is. Where you say, okay, my legs are hurting now, but I'm going to keep standing because I want the special reward for standing in Ramadan. Great. But we want this to continue outside of Ramadan. This is the training ground. And so you pay attention to yourself. Where am I getting tired? Okay, when Ramadan finishes, I'm going to keep up with 4 rakahs right after Isha or before I go to bed. And the Sahaba were different. Not everybody got up in the last third of the night. Some of them prayed the night prayer before they went to sleep. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he mentions, as collected in Bukhari and Muslim, he says, Awsani Khalili sallallahu alayhi wa sallam bi thalath. My close friend, my bosom buddy, he advised me to do 3 things, and never let them go. Siyamu thalathati ayyam min kulli shahr. That's the first one. Fasting 3 days out of every month. We said if you fast 3 days out of every month, you get the reward of what? Fasting the entire year. The Prophet ﷺ advised him 3 days out of every month. Don't let that door of Jannah, don't let that door close on you. Door of Bab al-Rayyan. Wa rak'atay ad-duha, that I pray 2 rak'ahs of duha prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith of Sahih Muslim that those two rak'ahs of duha, they are your gratitude for being able to move. They are your gratitude for being able to move. Kullu sulama, every joint. Kullu sulama min bani Adam alayhi shukr. Kullu yawmin talat alayhi shams. Every joint in an individual's body owes gratitude every day the sun rises. وَيَكْفِي مِنْ ذَلِكَ, and it's sufficient to show gratitude. وَيَكْفِي مِنْ ذَلِكَ رَكْعَتَانِ يَرْكَعَهُمَا مِنَ الضُّحَى. It's sufficient for you to show gratitude for the movement of your joints, for the movement of your body, to make 2 rakahs of duha in the day. And so the Prophet ﷺ advised him to make duha. What was the last piece of advice? وَأَنْ أُوتِرَ قَبْلَ أَنْ أَنَامَ, and that I pray the witr prayer before I go to sleep. This is Abu Hurairah. What's special about Abu Hurairah? He collected the most hadith. We have the most hadith from him from any of the other companions. He was very studious. and had lots of knowledge. But the Prophet ﷺ saw in him that getting up at the end of the night was what? It's difficult. And so if it's difficult for you, then do what? Pray the night prayer before you go to sleep. Remember the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar. Ni'ma rajul Abdullah. Abdullah would be an excellent person if he did what? If he prayed at night. And so the Prophet advised Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, if you can't get up in the last third, do it before you go to sleep. But pray that prayer. And so in Ramadan, we benefit from the night prayer. How? We get to see where our comfort zone is for that prayer. The Prophet used to pray 11 rak'ahs, as Aisha mentioned, inside of Ramadan, outside of Ramadan. That might not be easy for everybody. Find your ease in Ramadan, whatever that is, and continue it after Ramadan. And if you stay consistent, then you're going to find that easy, and then you'll be able to increase. Just like with weightlifting, just like with walking or running. And a person who just begins to exercise, are they going to lift really heavy weights? No. Are they going to run really far distances? No. It's going to be short. It's going to be light. But once you've been lifting the same weight or running the same distance for a year, for 2 years, it's going to become easy. And then you'll be able to put more plates on. You'll be able to increase. You'll be able to increase. So that's the idea. We benefit from Ramadan, getting in the habit of worship. Number 4, another way we can benefit from the night prayer, and these are a bit more practical for the actual night prayer in Ramadan, is as Sheikh Tahir mentioned last year in one of the talks he gave about Ramadan, is to plan, to make your schedule. And right now we have about 9-8 days before Ramadan comes in. You may not have the luxury because of your work schedule, because of your obligations. You may not have the luxury of being able to pray every night, all night. You may not be, it's going to be late. You might not get out of the masjid till 11 o'clock. Kids have to go to school in the morning. It might be difficult. So now what is your plan to cope? How are you going to keep the benefit but still be able to fulfill your obligations? And again, if you can't do it all the time, you do it when you can. Maybe you can't do it during the weekdays, but maybe you can do it on the weekend. Maybe Friday and Saturday, you can come to the night prayer. And that's what you commit yourself to. And maybe the other nights you say, I'm going to pray 4 rak'ahs at home. I pray 4 rak'ahs at home. So that at least I do something before I go to sleep. But it's important for you to plan that out. Because if you don't know what you're going to do, then Ramadan's going to come and then you're going to miss the first week or 10 days till you get yourself together. So you plan from now. How are you going to incorporate the night prayer in your schedule? How are you going to make it work? Maybe you can't do it every day, but maybe 2 days out of the week. That might work. 2 days out of the week and the weekend. And for the person that finds the weekdays difficult at all, you should still have a what? If you find that coming during the week to the masjid is difficult, you should still have intention. You should still have intention. Because Allah rewards you for your intention when you're unable with your action. Allah rewards you with your intention when you're unable with your action. There was a group of the Sahaba who, when the Battle of Tabuk, when the Sahaba left for that battle, they didn't have any horses or any animals to ride. They didn't have any money. They were poor. And Allah describes them in the Quran, in Surah At-Tawbah, chapter number 9 of the Quran. He describes them as crying. Grown men crying because they didn't have any money to spend in the cause of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, as I think is mentioned in the 3rd or the 4th or 5th hadith in the beginning of of Riyadh al-Salihin, in the chapter on Aniyah, he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ said to the Sahaba who were on the battle with him, who were traveling with him, he said that there are people in Medina who have been with us. Every valley that we've crossed, everywhere we've gone, they were right with us. Every step of the way, even though they were in Medina. They were held back because they had an excuse. They were held back because they had an excuse. How were they with the Prophet ﷺ, even though they were in Medina? How were they with the Prophet? Their intention. They wanted to be there. They wanted to be there. And so because they wanted to be there, and they really couldn't be there, Allah blessed them with the reward of being there. And so a person intends to do good. Intends to do good even when he can't. But it's important. It's important to know that if you intend, that you be sincere. Because Allah will test you in that intention. And that test will come when? On the weekend. When your schedule isn't so busy. When you can sleep in the next day. Because you don't have to go to work. Do you really come out to the masjid like you said you wanted to during the week? Or do you stay at home and watch the Sixers play in the playoffs? Is that what's more important to you? Do you stay at home and watch television because you need to relax? Or do you come out and show Allah, wallahi, if I had the ability to come through the week, I would come. It's just my fear of not fulfilling my obligation. Because it's the Prophet ﷺ who mentioned that Allah himself said, the Hadith Qudsi, my slave cannot draw nearer to me except with the obligations. You cannot draw closer to Allah than with the obligations. And going to work and feeding your family is an obligation. You fulfilling your duty to your employer is an obligation. You fulfilling your duty to your customers is an obligation. That is a contract you've made. It is the words you gave you're going to do. So it is an obligation you have. And so that obligation is more important than the extras. But when you do have the ability to do the extras, you do it. And so the test of your intention is the weekend. Do you come when you do have time? And for some people, maybe they have a flexible schedule. Maybe they have vacation time saved up. And so you put in for vacation for the last 10 nights. Not just for Eid. Not just for Eid. You want to benefit from Ramadan. If you have time saved up and you don't have anywhere planned to go, or you got some extra time, put some time away for Ramadan. Last 10 nights of Ramadan and Eid. I want all of it off. I don't want to have to go in and be busy with work and struggling to work if I don't have to, when I can be worshiping Allah, when I can be making itikaf, when I can be staying up all night and praying, getting His reward. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fair. Allah is just. And so what you notice is that there's a balance. Again, subhanAllah. Again, the prayer and fasting are sister complementary acts of worship. And so when the day is long for fasting, the night is short. And so Allah makes prayer easy. Standing the night to pray is not so long, because you can only stand so long. You understand? In the winter, the day is short. And so the night is long. So because you didn't have to struggle so much to fast, you got to work harder to worship and pray at night. And so right now, while it's summer and the nights are short, take advantage of those short nights. And the time you have to stay up to worship in those last 10 nights is very short. Very short. I mean, you pray Isha. Sometimes they pray Taraweeh. You get something to eat. You relax a little bit. It's time for the night prayer, Tahajjud. And then it's time for Suhoor, and your night's done. 9 nights, 10 nights, you're finished. Plan from now. Put in for now if you have the luxury of doing that. And the last point, the last way we'll mention to benefit is by taking time to reflect on the Quran before you come to the prayer. That you reflect on what's going to be read. That if you know that you're going to be attending a particular masjid, and the imam who's going to be reciting is going to follow a particular schedule, how many pages is he going to read? Is he going to read 1 page? Is he going to read half a page? Find out. Ask them, what's the plan? And then whatever that is, you make it a point to read, sorry, not 1 page, 1 page any per rak'ah, or is it going to be half a page for a rak'ah? Is he going to read half a juz or a quarter of a juz? Any a hizb or half a hizb? How much is he going to read? And whatever that is, you try to read and reflect on it before you come to the masjid, so that you have some type of idea about what's going to be read. And we're going to talk more specifically about reflecting on the Quran and how to do that. We'll go into detail about that in our talk tomorrow, inshallah, at this same location. And so just to kind of recap, we mentioned in the beginning that prayer and fasting are sister acts of worship. They complement each other. Can anybody give me one way that Ramadan shows that prayer and fasting go together? Can anyone give me one way that we've mentioned, or that you can think of, that show that prayer and fasting go together? That Ramadan is a month of salat, just like it's a month of fasting. Yes?
Tarawih.
The fact that Tarawih prayer is legislated. That there is a congregational night prayer that is established. Just like we fast together in Ramadan, we do what? We pray together. And we've mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the same reward is mentioned for both. Whoever fasts Ramadan with iman and seeking reward will get what? His sins forgiven. And whoever stands in Ramadan, standing doing what? Praying, will get his what? Sins forgiven. So the same reward is given for both of these acts of worship. Number 2, we mentioned that Ramadan is not the objective. Finishing Ramadan is not the objective. What is the point of Ramadan? We know the ayat says to develop taqwa. Is taqwa only to be developed in Ramadan? No. It's to be developed for all year. And so Ramadan is the what? It's the training time. Ramadan is training for the rest of the year. How does Allah help us train in Ramadan? How does Allah help us to train in Ramadan for the rest of the year?
The character, stay away from that which is forbidden.
He keeps us away from the 2 things that cause us problems, that get us in trouble. What are the 2 things that get us into trouble? Shaitan and ourselves. How do we control ourselves in Ramadan? Fasting. Fasting teaches you to control yourself. You stay away from food and drink, and you also stay away from yelling. You also stay away from insulting. You also stay away from fighting. Someone wants to fight with you, you don't go in with them. You say, I'm fasting. I'm fasting. And how does he keep the shaitan away from you? He chains him up in Ramadan. And so the idea is you have no distractions. You get to do a proper training in Ramadan. So that when Ramadan is finished, you're already in shape for the next 11 rounds. Yeah? Ramadan is round 1. You got 12 rounds. You know? So that's the idea. You got another 11 rounds to keep fighting. The 11th round gets tough. Yeah? But just before Ramadan comes, you get that second wind back. You get ready for it like people are now in Sha'ban. We also mentioned that praying the night prayer is a source of, it's an indication of righteousness. That the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about Abdullah ibn Umar, that he would be an excellent person if he prayed at night. And that just as fasting develops taqwa, that prayer is a sign of taqwa, as mentioned in Surah Al-Dhariyat, that the muhsineen that make it to Jannah, that from the first descriptions that he mentions from them is that they used to sleep little at night because they were up praying. And we said it's also a chance for you to notice your own comfort zone. That you see where you're comfortable praying. When do you get tired in the Taraweeh prayer? After 2 rakahs, after 4 rakahs, after 6. And then wherever you see you get tired, stop there and make that your habit after Ramadan. That I'm going to commit myself that after Ramadan, I'm going to pray 2 rakahs every night before I go to sleep. Or I'm going to pray 4 rakahs every night before I go to sleep. And then I'll go to sleep. And if Allah blesses me to get up in the middle of the night, I might pray 2 more. That's okay. You can pray some, sleep, and then pray some other ones. That's not a problem. But at least I'm going to pray these 4 or these 2 before I go to bed and then make witr. Now, we also said number 4, you plan your schedule out. See where the problems are going to come in with your prayer and make sure that you plan out how you're going to deal with that. Whether it's only doing it on some days, maybe 1 day off, 1 day on. Maybe if you have the luxury of taking some time off, take some time off. And then also by understanding what's going to be read and communicating with the masjid, trying to find out what's the reading schedule so that you can read ahead and see what's going to be recited. And we'll talk about reflecting on the Quran, inshallah, in our lesson tomorrow. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to gather together. We ask Him to make this talk a benefit for us. I ask Him to make it a benefit for me personally, to help me to be the person who benefited more than you all, and to also help you to benefit as well, and help our families to benefit, to make us of those who reach Ramadan, who benefit from Ramadan, and who continue after Ramadan. But again, we recognize that Ramadan is not the goal. It's not the end. It's the beginning. It's the training for the next 11 months. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu a'lam wa sallallahu nabina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran. Jazakallahu khair.